Shulchan Aruch Harav, Taf Ein Hey, chapter 475, tells us in Seif Tedvav, number 15, Mitzvat Maror min HaTorah eina ela bizman she'apesach ne'echal. We have several mitzvot involved with the Pesach. We have the mitzvah of matzah and we have the mitzvah of maror. He tells us, as well as other poskim, that the mitzvah of maror applies solely and only the time that the Paschal lamb was eaten, because the Torah said, shene'emar, al matzot umerorim yochlu. You should eat it, a combination of matzah and maror. אבל בזמן הזה אינו אלא מדברי סופרים, but in our times it's rabbinic only, שתקנו זכר למקדש, in order to commemorate the בית המקדש. אבל חיוב אכילת מצה בלילה הראשון, but the obligation of eating matzah at the first night of Pesach, בזמן הזה, even in our times, מן התורה, it's biblically, שנאמר, בערב תאכלו מצות, in the eve you should eat מצות, ולא הוזכר שם פסח, and not mention the word Pesach. So what we have in our discussion for this daf, we're going to discuss a lot of practical halachot. First, as we mentioned, the mitzvah of maror. It's already clarified to us that it's originated biblically. In our times it's rabbinic. How about eating matzah? We so far understand that it's biblical, but we need to clarify at some point. Setting up the Seder plate, involvement with the Haggadah, and many inside halachot in regards to Eve, the first Eve of Pesach. That's the core part of this daf, and we are in daf Kuf Tet Vav 115, tractate Pesachim. 8 line from the top of the page. Amar Ravina tells us, Amar li Rav Mesharshiya brei de Rav Natan, Hachi ke'amar Hillel mishmei de Gemara. If you remember, yesterday we discussed Hillel doing the Haggadah. We have the famous sandwich. So far we understand in regard to Korech that maror is deoraita, is biblical, but Pesach, since maror is deoraita only if it's in conjunction to Paschal lamb, so Pesach, it's not bazman hazeh. So far we don't have that in our time. So here we spoke about Hillel. Hillel, it wasn't the one, Ran tells us it's one of the Amoraim. He said, Lo nichoch inish matzah u'maror be'ade v'adade v'nechol. A person should not do this sandwiches, wrap up and eat together matzah and maror. Mishum desviu alan matzah bazman hazeh doraita u'maror derabanan. So here you see the process how they make this halacha. They hold that matzah, even in our times, since we do not have a korban Pesach, a Paschal lamb, the oraita, since we don't have that, maror, it's only rabbinic. Why? Because the Torah tells us in Shmot, they said in Shmot chapter 12, Al matzot umerorim yochlu, you should combine matzot together with a bitter herb. So the Gemara derived from that, we're going to study it in page 120, that eating maror, it's not a separate mitzvah by the Torah, but it's only depend upon eating Paschal lamb, achilat Pesach, which mean we have one positive commandment to eat the meat of Pesach combining with matzah and maror, and that's the Rambam tells us in Ilchot Chametz U'Matzah chapter 7. So what the Hillel said, that even we have this mitzvah of matzah, which is juxtaposed to Paschal lamb, the biblical commandment applies even in our days, and that's the halacha, that the mitzvah of matzah, it's also in our days, biblical. So therefore, Ve'ate maror derabanan, since we said that eating bitter herb, it's solely rabbinic, umevatel lei lematzah deoraita. So what happened is, the matzah is biblical, in one hand. Eating bitter herb is rabbinic. So it means that the eating maror abrogated mitzvah of Torah to eat matzah, and therefore a person did not fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah. So for sure, when a person swallow both matzah and maror together, so the taste of the bitter herb combined with the matzah and basically take away the taste of the matzah. So even usually these two different things, two different species is not combining together in a sense. It's you have the separate taste of each one of them. Now since you have this deep bitterness of maror, it's take away all the idea of the mitzvah of matzah and abrogated. So the Ran and Rabbeinu David and Maran Chilwa elaborate on that. But we said, Va'afilu leman de'amar mitzvot ein mevatlot zo et zo, even according to one who said that when it's come to the mitzvot are not nullified each other, which means that principle applies only to a mixture of one food whose obligation applies what? Hanimile deoraita, by Torah laws. Be deoraita, Torah laws with another food whose obligation applies by Torah law. But if you have this situation, or derabanan, be derabanan, you have one rabbinic mitzvah, another rabbinic mitzvah, and you combine both, that's you have a certain application. But look what happened here. Since you do not have an equal in those mitzvot together the same level, so since you don't have them as equal, aval deoraita u derabanan, since you have here a special situation, right? What do you have here? Biblical with rabbinic, which means you have the mitzvah of matzah and you have the mitzvah of maror. So since you have this situation, you eat them together, ati derabanan umevatle leoraita. Oh, so you have here the rabbanan. What is the rabbanan? Eating maror. And it comes and nullifies the food which obligates my Torah law, which is the matzah. So you see a situation here that the person did not fulfill the mitzvah, lo yatzai yedei chovato. That's the point. So according to that Tana, that say that one mitzvah do not annul each other, only if both mitzvot have the same level of obligation, which means either both are biblical or both rabbinic. So Rashbam said the one mitzvah not annul the others because they have the equal, the point of total equal between them. But the idea of one rabbinic and one biblical, boom, you have an issue, because then here you have matzah and maror and one annul the others. Now the sages disagree with him and said the mitzvot annul each other, mitzvot mevatlot zo et zo. So even if they have equal chiyuv, equal obligation. So if you have matzah, which is what we said so far, matzah is what? Doraita, biblical. Maror. And it's combined with maror, that what we said is rabbinic, and you combine both. So all we said that, let's face it, in reality, we eat matzah and maror. What type of taste? Take a little child. It's just bar mitzvah boy, right? You give him matzah and maror. What is going to tell us? What the taste he feels? If it's a real maror, you tells us it's a taste of bitter herb. And what we said so far, that maror is rabbinic and matzah is biblical, deoraita. So it's mean that when it's come to a mitzvah of a deoraita, the rabbanan, the biblical, it's considering like sort of optional, that it's not contained a level of mitzvah. That's what Tosfot tells us, דיבור המתחיל דעתי. So, what we understand so far, that the maror, he has basically annulled or abrogated the mitzvah, and not the opposite way. Why? Because matzah is the oraita. So it's considering totally, as we said in Shulchan Aruch Harav, right? It's considering a mitzvah, but maror, it's only rabbinic. So therefore, if you tell me that he's already fulfilled his mitzvah of matzah by eating kezayit at the early part of the seuda, so now when he combined the both, matzah is basically a combination. The rabbinic is overlap in a sense, is take over the biblical part of the matzah. So again, we don't have time. The Tosfot and the Ran elaborate on that. Just let's go on because it's a lot to discuss. So the Gemara elaborates on that, and it said when you have two mitzvot that their chiyuv, their obligation is equal, so one not mevatel, not annul the other. Man tana de shametlei mitzvot ein mevatzlot zo el zo. Who is the one who tells us that one mitzvah does not annul the other mitzvah? Who is that? Hillel. This Hillel is, who is the Hillel here? He is the elder Hillel that served as the head of the community during the second Beit HaMikdash, second temple. The Tanya. Amru alav al Hillel shehaya korchan bevat achat, that Hillel combined the Paschal offering together with matzah and maror, which means most of the Rishonim said that he combined all three together. Which is what? All three? Korban Pesach, Paschal lamb, matzah and maror, all three together. But, and that's the Yerushalmi and Tosefta, but Rabbeinu Hananel hold the way that we are doing in our Pesach, which is a combination only maror and matzah and not the meat part. Anyway, so he said, ve'ochlan b'yachad, so Hillel combined it. So you may ask me now, how come during Pesach we don't involve meat with that when we make the sandwich, right? We take the matzah and maror, we don't take the meat. So again, as I said, the Rambam and the Raavad and the way Rabbeinu Hanan mentioned, that's the way we're doing in a practical way. But anyway, the Shene'emar, the Torah tells us in Korban Pesach, in Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, chapter 9, Al matzot umerorim yochlu. Al, in that context, in Hebrew, means together with. They eating matzot and maror together. So, what do we derive from that? That Hillel has no concern that combining the three mitzvot. What are the three? Korban Pesach, matzah and maror. Combining all three together, they should not abrogate each other, should not annul each other, because according to him, when we have the Beit HaMikdash, when we have the Holy Temple in existence, it's all biblical. That's the Hillel point of view. So therefore Hillel hold that this sandwich, so it means that even they have them as a separate mitzvot nifradot, they're not mevatlot, they're not annul each other. So for sure the Tosfot here have to say, and the Rambam hold that they don't annul each other, and there are those who disagree with Hillel, who are Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan tells us, Cholkim alav chaver Rav al Hillel. The colleagues disagree with Hillel, and you know in Judaism disputation it's encouraged, it's normal, right? So they say the Tanya, we learn in the Braita, in different Braita, Yachol, we may say that the mitzvah of eating Pesach and matzah and bitter herb maror is yeheh korchan bevat achad v'ochlan kederech shilel ochlan, that the person should combine all three and eat them as one part. Talmud lomar al matzot umerorim yochluhu. They should eat matzot umerorim together. So what does that mean? So that language meaning that these three different type of food you can eat afilu ze bifnei atzmo veze bifnei atzmo, that you can, that one may eat even this matzah by itself and that the bitter herb by itself, each of them, and the Paschal lamb by itself, each one. So it means what we understand here. The sages derive from the word yochlu oto. They eat that which apply to the meat of the Paschal lamb. But the Tosfot said that the word hu, right, which means oto, is like superfluous, and he said it's applied to the meat, so only that one. Anyway, so what we understand from that the sages disagree with Hillel, and they hold that you should not combine the Paschal lamb together with matzah and maror, but you should eat each of them separately, which means what we derive from that. So let's go deeper. That the sages hold that one mitzvah can annul another mitzvah, even they have all the three mitzvot the same level of chiyuv, of obligation. So therefore, Matkifla Rav Ashi have a strong objection to that, and he said, if that's the point, that the Braita hold that the Pesach and Matzah and Maror can annul each other, my afilu. So why we need the word afilu, which means that if a person eats all the three together, for sure he fulfill his obligation, which means that what he understands. So the Chazon Ish said that what we understand Rav Ashi is, if a person do like a tortilla, like wrapping up all together, he take the little bit of the Paschal lamb, a little bit of bitter herb, a little bit of matzah, and he eat it together. So he said, afilu means you should eat it as a package, as a sandwich, but even you eat each of them separately, it's fine. So he said here, why the Tana needs to use the word afilu. So he said, because that word is an indication, the word afilu, that Hillel's opinion is not rejected entirely, but a person fulfills his obligation if he eats the item without putting together, combining all of them. El Amar Rav Ashi, this Braita hold the same as Hillel, that the mitzvah of the Paschal lamb, matzah and maror, it's to eat together. Hai Tana Hachiktani, the Tana meant as follow. Yachol lo yotze behu, yedei chovato, and may a person do not fulfill his obligation with eating Pesach, matzah and maror, ela im ken korchan bevad achat, only if he wrap them together, ve'ochlan kederech she'Hillel haya ochlan, and he eats them the way that Hillel eats them, which means I may say that the whole idea of wrapping them together that Hillel taught us from that line, it's create ikuva, which means it's even bediavad, even after the fact, a person eats each of them separately, he did not fulfill his obligation. Talmud lomar, so the Torah come and teach us al matzot umerorim yochluhu, that bediavad, not lechatchila, after the fact, the mitzvah fulfilled, afilu, even we eat ze bifnei atzmo veze bifnei atzmo, which means even you eat each of them, one fulfill his obligations, even if he eats the matzah by itself and the bitter herb by themselves. So the whole idea of what Hillel HaZaken tells us that we should wrap it, it's not by only his mindset that should be lechatchila, which means we do not have a real disputation between Hillel and this Braita, and the Braita, the second one come, that Hillel hold that after the fact, b'diavad, even afilu, even that situation, if he eats separate, the Ran tells us that's what Hillel meant, that he fulfilled the mitzvah. For sure, Tosfot here, Amar Rav Ashi have a mahalach. Anyway, so what we understand so far, that we have two different directions here. How a person eats Pesach, matzah, and maror at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Let's make sure that we all understand. according to Hillel, lechatchila, the way that we prefer to is we have to wrap them all together and eat them together. According to the sages, which means the colleague of Hillel, you have to eat it dafka separately, each of them by itself. So, and then the Gemara put the way that we should do in practical matter to our times, that we don't have Beit HaMikdash, and we don't have the Korban Pesach that we have the right at the time of Beit HaMikdash. Hashta de lo itmar hilcheta, now that the halacha was stated lo kehillel velo kerabanan, since we don't have a final point neither by Hillel, not kerabanan, but the rules that the disputation many against one, it's not apply, because the second brighter, the sages hold the same as Hillel. So he said, mevarech al achilat matzah ve'achil, והדר מברך על אכילת מרור ואכיל, והדר אכיל מצה וחסה בעדי הדדה, בלא ברכה זרח מקדש קהילה. That's practical halachot. So what happened now? Since we have all of this discussion, you see how much practical halachot we have in this Gemara today, that the person should make a separate bracha for eating matzah, and eat a matzah independently. And then a person go ahead later in the Agada, you see it in the Agada, he eat maror, bitter herb, and he make a separate blessing for eating bitter herbs. And then he does the both, right? And he is not using a bracha. And you look at the Agadot, what we said in Agadot, Zeicher LaMikdash Kilel. We said this remembrance of the Beit HaMikdash in the manner that Hillel, in the days of the Beit HaMikdash, who ate matzah and bitter herbs together with the Paschal lamb. So it means that both, regardless, both according to Hillel and according to the sages, in our time, since there is no Beit HaMikdash, so the mitzvah of eating matzah has to be independently, because that we said earlier, because the whole idea of eating matzah is biblical. Remember we read it at the introduction? And eating maror is, no, help me. Eating maror is what?
Rabbinic.
Rabbinic, thank you.
Rabbanan.
So Hillel hold that when you're eating the maror with matzah, what happened? The maror taking over when you eat them together. But when you regard to eating maror, you see a difference between the two avenues. According to the sages that hold that the time of Beit HaMikdash, the bitter herb was eaten independently. Even in our days, you have to eat it independently. However, according to Hillel, that whole that is time of the Beit HaMikdash, you need to eat together bitter herb with Pesach and matzah. In our days, you have to eat it together with the matzah, because that's the way they ate it in the time of Beit HaMikdash. Now, what we understand so far, if we hold the halacha according to the sages, we should eat kezait, a olive bark of matzah independently, and then we eat bitter herb independently, and that's enough. And if we to Beit Hillel, we should eat kezait matzah, olive bark of matzah separately, and then we wrap up and eating olive bark of matzah together with the olive bark of maror, which means the fulfillment of the obligation is to eat two separate kezait of matzah together with one kezait maror. But since we do not have any final halacha, neither way of those ways, so those different directions will not bring us out of the state of uncertainty, because the first one, you do not have the fulfillment of the mitzvah of wrapping up with maror according to Hillel, and the second one, even according to the sages, the second kezait, it's basically take away the whole taste of the bitter herbs. So here you see here that that's what basically Tosfot said in Dibur HaMatchil Mevarech. He said, El HaMevarech, he said that you have here two mitzvot that not annul each other. So in order to fulfill both, we have to eat, as I said earlier, we have to eat kezait matzah earlier, independently. That's according to everyone. And then you eat kezait maror independently. That's according to the sages. And then you eat together kezait matzah with kezait maror. So you end up how many? 2 times kezait of matzah, 1 time kezait maror, and that's the way you do it. And that's the way Baal HaMaor and Shagat Aryeh in Kuf and Rosh and all the poskim hold. So Amar Rabbi Lazar, Omar Rav Oshaya. So now we learn the Mishnah that after drinking the cup, Kiddush cup, you put a tibul, you're dipping with the chazeret, which means you're dipping with chazeret or other herb with another liquid, and then you eat it. So he said, Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rav Oshaya, Kol shetibulo b'makshke tzarich netilat yadayim. He said, anything that is dipping in the liquid before it is eaten require the whole idea of washing hands. Why? Because we remember that we talk about the tum'ah and the ritual impurity, and the obligation to wash one's hands was instituted to preserve the whole idea of ritual purity and prevent people from conducting tum'ah. So therefore, if we take, for example, a vegetable and combine it with kutach that have some dairy or vinegar, that it's wine, so therefore you have to have washing hands. So just a word of introduction. Biblically speaking, anything that becomes ritually impure it can be a part of a person's body, which means in general, if you touch a corpse, then the entire body is impure. But there are some situations that part of the body is only impure. So in other words, the whole point of washing hands is to take away the ritual impurity applies to the hand. For example, when you wake up in the morning. For example, before you're eating bread. But that's a rabbinic institution, rabbinic decree that they call that sheni letumah, second degree of ritual impurity. So that's applied when they're eating the trumah in time of Beit HaMikdash and make something that is kodashim, that is consecrated, to make it ritually impure. So basically sheni letumah, second level of ritual impurity, is considering the most lenient level of non-consecrated item. So he said here, the point is based on what we study in Shabbat. Remember Shabbat, page 14. The rabbi said that stam yadayim askaniyotem. Usually what happened while we talk with the hands. We're using hands a lot, right? So since the hands touch a covers part of a person's body, for example, a person is sweating, the person is part of the body is not clean, so therefore the sages put an institution. So since the hands, it's not always clean, especially we talk about ritual cleanness, so therefore if he touched truma or he touched kodashim, he is no longer in interest of eating it, so, and it's not becoming for that holy sacred items. So they put that it like in that manner it's like the same as he touch total something that is total impure, like dead animal for that manner, to understand, and he needs to wash his hand. The key point is that the person should be very cautious, very circumspect when he touch truma and kodashim before he washing hand, to make sure that his hand is clear. So he said, Amar Rav Papa. So Rav Papa derived from that Shma mina, we derive from that, halacha, hai chasa, this letter on Pesach, Kuf Tedvav Amud Bet 115b, צריך לשקועי בחרוסת משום kappa. One must submerge it in the charoset due to the bitterness and poison in the leather. Kappa, it's letters, because what happened is kappa is like almost like poison. It's very strong. Mm-hmm. And that's like you eating onion, Rashi said. It's very, very strong. So Rashbam said that it's applied to a certain animal that is small, tiny, internet fast, very, very small, minute one. So it's a danger for a person if he eats it. That's the way Rabbeinu Hanan says. But anyway, so they said, therefore you have to take away that bitterness, so you have to combine it with charoset. The isal kadatach lo tzarich leshikuye. If you tell me that you don't need to deepen with charoset, then you don't worry for that dangerous. He says netilat yadayim lamali. Why you require them to wash a person to wash hands before he eats? Ha lo naga. He's not fully deepened it, but he doesn't fully deepen it with the mashke. So the Gemara rejected that and said, "V'dilma le'olamei malach lo tzarich leshikui." So the truth is, I'll say to you, according to halacha, a person doesn't need to submerge the lettuce in charoset. V'kapa mereicha maye, which means this strong bitterness, by even have the odor of the charoset, it's already taking away. So Rabbeinu Hanan said that either that tolat is dead by smelling that odor, or you just said that the combination of that odor taking away. Ela lama li netilat yadayim. So why do I need to wash hands before dipping? Dilma meshakule. That's a different story. Maybe they will submerge the lettuce, so you have to wash hands because you have a chance to transfer when you're dipping it, ritual impurity. And that's basically, we study later, that's the Ramah tells us in Orach Chaim Kuf Nun Chet. Next. The Papa tells us another important halacha. V'amar Rav Papa, lo nishei inish maror b'charoset. You have to be careful. A person should not leave bitter herb on the charoset for a long time. Why? Dilma agav chalye tavlin, because the sweetness of the spices of the charoset nullified its bitterness. Mevatel lemarore, so they're taking away the bitter herb. Ubeinan ta maror veleika. He needs to have the taste of bitter herb, and he doesn't have it. Which you see here the importance of feeling connected to our ancestors even at that time, and eating the bitter herb and feeling the bitterness of the herbs. So that's one person about tshuva, the person who became religious, told me that one of the things that makes him religious is the fact that we as Jews, when we have the most highest celebration, the celebration of freedom, we don't march in the street with ammunition, we're eating bitter herb. And we're eating bread of poverty. Mm-hmm. So there's an obligation to taste, to feel the bitter herb. So the Gemara said, if you combine it with something that carries so much other tastes, like sweetness, mm-hmm. it's no longer a feeling of bitter herb. Right. Now we're going back to the discussion of netilat yadayim, or something that combined with a liquid. The Gemara said, Adberei Rav Chizda leRabbanan Ukva v'darash. So Rav Chizda went before Rabbanan Ukva, because Rabbanan Ukva was the son of the auxiliary, right, the head of the community in Babylon, and the grandson of Rav, that's Gemara said in Chulin, 92. So he gave him the honor. נטל ידיו בטיבול ראשון, נוטל ידיו בטיבול שני. He taught that if one washed his hand for the first dipping, he should wash his hand again for the second dipping. So the Gemara elaborates on that. Amarua Rabbanan kamei de Rav Papa. The rabbis explained to us. Ha be'alma itma. What they said is the statement that the person should dip food twice any time. It's not necessarily applied to Leila Seder, the night of Pesach. It can apply any other time. For example, a person thinking about first time to dipping, and he was not aware that it's going to happen again. He have some appetizer, or he didn't pay attention to guard his hand, so he needs to do it again. So Rashi and Rashbam reminds us the whole point, as we said earlier, is because yadayim askaniyotem, because the hands always moving around and do things. So that's the idea of washing hands. So they said, the isal kadeatach hachaitmar. If you tell me that what Rabbanan Ukva tells us here in regards to do it twice, which is what? Karpas and maror on bitter herbs. Lama lenetilat yadayim trei zimne. Why you require to wash hands 2 times? Ha mashale yadei chada zimna. But the person has already washed his hands once. So he did it once for the first time, and he knew in advance that it's going to be a second time, and he guarded his hand for a whole period of time. So Rav Papa come and totally disagree with that, contradicted. Amarlu Rav Papa, Aderabba, Hache Itma. Quite the contrary, the halacha was stated specifically here, which means that's applied to karpas and maror. The isal kadeatach be'alma itmar. If you tell me that that's a general statement, the way you said it, lama li trei tibule. Why Rabbanan Ukva needs to speak about 2-time dipping? That's not the way you do it during the year around. Elamai, what you have to say, Hacha itmar. They have to speak in regards to the night of the Seder. So these 2 times dipping you know in advance, and the person have the focusing. He doesn't have a sachat adat. He is focusing on the whole Seder, and remember that he washed his hands first time already, and he guard his hand not to touch anything during that time. So we asked this question we asked earlier, Netilat yadayim trei zimnei lamali. Why do you need to wash your hands twice? Hameshaya leyedecha zimne. We already did it 1 time. So the Gemara said, Amre, we go by the Rav Papa, kevan devai lemeimar agadeta vehaleila. Since a person needs to do the reading of the Haggadah, the story of the Exodus in Egypt, and the Hallel, Dilma asuche asche ledate venaga. So he is talking, and he is not pay attention, and he is not pay attention. He is elaborated on the mitzvah of Pesach, and he's go on and on and on and on and on, and he forget his hands. So therefore, he needs to go ahead and wash the hands. So Tosfot said that this language is not necessarily for the maror, that he needs to wash the hands. Anyway, you need to wash hands before eating the matzah. So anyway, so what we have here basically twice. That's the way we do it. We twice washing our hands, right? Now, the Gemara have a discussion in different way of eating in regards to fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah and bitter herb. Amar Rabba, listen carefully. Bala matzah yatsa, bala maror lo yatsa. You have some situation that person just swallow piece of matzah. So if he does that, he still fulfilled the mitzvah in the Torah that said in Exodus 12, Ba'erev tochlu matzot, boom, he ate a piece of matzah, he fulfilled it. But if he didn't swallow properly the bitter herb, he did not fulfill the mitzvah. Why? Because the Torah requires us to have the feeling, the taste of bitter herb. Why? To commemorate the embitterness of the subjugation of our ancestors in Egypt. So that's the idea of maror. Either the Avenue of Rabbeinu Yonah said that the bitter herb of eating something, or the Torah said, "Vaymareru et chayem ba'avoda kasha." The Rashbam said that they have the bitterness of hard slavery. So anyway, bala matzah u'maror yachdav. He ate matzah u'maror together. Yedei matzah yatsa. Yedei maror lo yatsa. So that's what we said earlier, that he fulfilled the mitzvah of matzah, but not the maror. Gracham besivuv la'am. If he wrapped them together and he ate them, so how he ate them together? So he wrapped them in a palm net, the thin interlacing of vine that sprout around the palm tree, and he swallowed them. So he's not fulfilled the obligation even even to eat matzah. Why? Because he's totally wrapped the matzah in maror, so it's not really taste in his mouth. You know what happened when you have some cover of the food, big one, so sometimes the inside part of the food you don't taste. So it's not considering full manners of eating. So אמר רב שימי בר אשי, מצה לפני כל אחד ואחד, מרור לפני כל אחד ואחד, וחרוסת לפני כל אחד ואחד. So the time of the Talmud, they used to sit on the bed, on the floor, almost floor, like the havdil. You see nowadays the Japanese, right? This is almost on the floor. It's a little mattress on the floor. They have a separate table to each and every person. So what happened is, if that's the story, you put on each plate, on each table, small table of each individual, matzah, maror lekol echad vechad, a bitter herb to each and every person, and charoset before each and every one of them. So now, the Rashbam tells us that if you have a general table like this table, and you have many people around the table, so then it's a different story. But he said, ואין עוקרין את השולחן, אלא לפני מי שאומר האגדה. So in other words, you take out the table and you set it up only before the leader. So Tosfot said, the reason here, the Rav Shimi said that even the rest of the year, the minhag is that the Baal Habayit make hamotzi and give a little bread to each and every attendance. But here, the night of the Seder, it's better, is lechatchila, the way it should be, that each and every person make a separate blessing for the matzah and maror that he has for himself and eat right away. Why? Because sometimes, like in our house, Baruch Hashem, we have sometimes, I could do it the second night in the shul, sometimes more than 100 people can or in our home we have sometimes 40, 50, 60 people. So sometimes people may need to wait long time. So it's better to have it for each and every person by himself. And that's the way Magen Avraham said in Kuf Samech Zayin. Rav Huna Omer, Kulu Nami, all of that, matzah, bitter herb, charoset, Lifnei mi sheomer agada, that has to go before the leader. And the other tables, which corresponds to the Seder plates used nowadays, are left in their place. Vehilcheta kerav Huna, and we pasken halacha, we rule according to Rav Huna. So now we elaborate on the idea of akirat hashulchan, taking away the table. Lama okrim et hashulchan? Why we remove the table? Amre dever Rabbi Yanai kedei sheyakiru tinokot v'yishalu. That's so beautiful, because that's apply all different avenue of Pesach. We put the strange foods, etc. We want the children to keep asking questions. In Judaism we said many times, right, that the beauty of our religion, we keep asking and asking questions, and we try to answer on our best. So the true manners of telling the story of Exodus in the manner of question and answers. So that's the idea. The Torah said, if your son asks you, and you should respond to him, right? So it said it many times. So that's the idea. The Minchat Chinuch said in Mitzvah Kaf Aleph in 21, says that's the manner of Leila Seder. That we make all these changes, all this weird food in that night, in order to have these children come and ask questions. You see it in Shulchan Aruch Harav, in Taf Ein Gimel, Seif Yudalet. He said it, I'd like to read it to you directly. He said it, ולמה תקנו חכמים דבר זה? Why the sages made it? Again, Taf Ein Gimel, Seif Yudalet, 473:13. He said, the sages instituted it כדי להטמיע את התינוקות, in order to create some wondering among the young children, שיראו שינוי, that they see something weird, something different on a table, שאוכלים ירקות בטיבול, that all of a sudden they see us as parents taking this produce and dipping them, not in a manner they get used all year round. שאין דרך לאוכלם קודם הסעודה בכל ימות השנה, that all year round they never see us before washing hands, before sitting and eating meal, doing such a thing, deepening something with doing this manner. So they right away וישאלו על שינוי זה, they're going to ask us a question, what's going on? שאמירת ההגדה, listen at this beautiful language of Baal HaTanya, he said that the saying of the Haggadah, מצוותה לאומרת דרך תשובה. The mitzvah is to go in a manner of responding, of answering a question, על שאלות ששאלו, שנאמר, כי שלחה בנך ואמרת לבנך ודים היינו. So that's basically the whole manner of doing it properly. Abaye, here's a story in regards to that. Abaye, when he was a young man, אשר בך ירוחם יתום. He was an orphan in young age. Hava yativ kamei de Rabbah. He said before Rabbah, Rabbah taught him Torah. That's the famous Gemara in Gittin 34. So he said in the night of the Seder before Rabbah, Chaza de kamadlei takami kamei. He saw that they removed the table before the Rabbah. Amar lehu, Abaye asked, well, what's going on? Why are you taking away the table? עדיין לא כאכלינן, אתו כמאקרי תקן מקמן? We didn't eat and you take away the table from us? What's going on? אמר לי רבה said to Abaye, פטרתן מלומר מה נשתנה. So in that manner, you don't need to ask that question of מה נשתנה. We don't need to go to the list of that questions of מה נשתנה. Already go straight to the story of the Haggadah, etc., etc. So anyway, so Rashbam understand it literally. That's really taking away the whole set of Manishtana. Tosfot disagrees. Tosfot said that's not exempt them from saying Manishtana regardless, because that's even the father need to ask himself in that manner, that everyone, when we have our children, if you pay attention, they ask those questions, then we all repeat those questions by ourselves. Now, the Torah tells us that the way that we eat the bread is a bread of poverty, and the Gemara said, when we used in the Haggadah, ha lachma anya in Aramaic, this is the bread of poverty, we're pointing the matzah, the achalu avat hana be'ara de Mitzrayim, that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Amar Shmuel said, lechem oni, the bread of poverty, the matzot called bread of poverty, lechem she'onim alav dvarim. So the word oni can go in both. Can go oni milshon ani, like indigent, but it's also in the language of oneh, meaning response, that you give a response to many things, which is that you have to recite the Haggadah and saying Hallel on Pesach while you have the matzot out of the front of you. So oni, it's like ve'anita ve'amarta, you should say it, you respond. We bring a proof to that. Tanya nami achi, lechem oni, bread of poverty. What does that mean? Lechem she'onin alav dvarim arbe. The bread that we respond only, la'anot, in that sense, many answers. Davar acher, lechem oni, we go in different avenue, as we said earlier. Oni ani, ani meaning indigent, poor. Ktiv, it's written in the Torah, Ain, Nun Vav, without Nun Yud, without the letter Vav. So we derive from that is like bread of a poor people. So it means that we eat it in a manner that poor person eat his bread. Ma me ani shedarko biprusa. What is the manner of poor person that he get used not to eat the entire loaf of bread, but eat only one slice? The Isaiah said in 58, "Halo faros laraev lachmecha." That usually in the manner of great poverty, you slice, you paros, one slice of bread, you give it to a poor person. So they said, Afkan, Kuftet Zain 116, here also, in regard to matzah, biprusa, which means we break the matzah, that broken piece, we eat. But Rashi and Rashbam said that the mitzvah is to say the bracha specifically on the broken matzah and not to full matzah. But the way that we do it, that's the way the Ran tells us, Rabbeinu David, that we do it. If you remember that we do it doing the Haggadah, doing the process, we have yachatz, we break the matzah, and then one of those pieces we make the bracha al achilat matzah, and the biggest piece we eat it later on, that we call afikoman. That's the way that we do it. Davar acher, another thing, ma darko shel ani. What's the manner of a poor person? Hu masik ve'ishto ofa. How a poor person does it? He heats the oven, and his wife bakes quietly before the small amount of food they have used up. Afkan nami hu masik ve'ishto ofa. So here too, when baking matzah, he heats the oven and his wife bakes quickly so the dough doesn't rise, and this is why matzah is called the poor man's bread. So Rav Hai Gaon said that that's not always the case. The purpose of the Torah used the word lechem only, bread of poverty, that the person should focus by himself to do the matzah and not depend upon others to do it for him. The Vilna Gaon said in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Taf Samech 460 that we should make an effort to do it by ourselves. So then the Mishnah said, Af al pi she'ein charoset mitzvah, even though the eating charoset is not a mitzvah, but we need to bring the charoset to the Seder table. So the Gemara asks, V'lo mitzvah mishum mai maitla, if it's not mitzvah, why you bother to bring it? Amar Rav Ami mishum kampa, the same story. Either you say that it's a small tolat, small tiny minute animal, or it's the bitter, or the herb. Amar Rav Asi kappa dechasa chama, which means the healing, the panacea for that is eating radish. Which means if someone ate this type of chazeret and he's sick, so he should eat radish and heal himself. The Ran said because the poor person, his wife, they are always very quick, very hasten to make it because they are very hungry. Kappa de chama karte, is kappa de karte chamime. So again, this is healing that you eat for a poison in that man, your radishes leaks, and the remedy for poison in leeks is hot water. Kappa de chulu, all the poison of all vegetable, what you do? Chamime, you should drink all vegetable is hot water. So the Gemara comments, adehache vehache, neima hache. Meanwhile, until they bring him hot water, he should say this is a lachash, which again we don't just explain it literally. He should say kappa kappa dachina lach v'leisha benatach v'letamani kalatech. So again, poison, poison, I remember you, and your 7 daughters and your 8 daughters-in-law. So again, this is only lachash, and you see it many times in the Shas. So Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Tzadok Omer, mitzvah, that combining maror and charoset, it's a mitzvah. My mitzvah, Rabbi Levi Omer, zecher letapuach. Rabbi Levi said it's a member of the apple. This apple is one of the indigent in the charoset. So we said it in the Song of Songs, who comes up for the wilderness, reclining upon the beloved, under the apple tree, I'll awaken you. So we said Song and Pesach, and it's a chapter 8 in Shir HaShirim. So that's the place that the daughter of Israel deliver in Egypt. The Gemara said in Sota, page 11, that they are so devoted that they did it despite the frightening of their life situation. The more subjugation, the more divine providence have upon us. So it's an expression of loyalty and true devotion to God. Rabbi Yochanan Omer zecher lati. Rabbi Yochanan said the charoset remembers of the mortar used by the Jewish people for their slave labor in Egypt. So that's the way the Rambam Ilchot Chametz U'Matzah chapter 7 said. And the Rambam said that we have to combine matzah and charoset even in our times, that we eat separately the matzah and maror. But most of the rabbis disagree. They said, how come you take two opposite? One is the expression of freedom, one is the expression of slavery, and you combine them. So the two Orach Chaim disagree with him, Taf Ayin Hey. Anyway, so the Gemara concluded, Amar Abaye said, since we have the disputation of the mitzvah of the charoset, the reason, Hilkach, consequently, tzarich lekayuhe, to fulfill both direction, one must prepare a tart, which means that you combine apples with wine with other thing that carries vinegar, and ve'tzarich lesamuche, and you have to make it thick. So because you combine a lot of things together. So Tosfot in Dibur HaMatchil Tzarich brought Yerushalmi that he said that it's a commemoration of the blood. Anyway, anyway, Tanya כבתי רבי יוחנן, תבלין זכר לתבן, חרוסת זכר לתית. So you take the tavlin, the spice used in charoset, remembers of the hay that our forefather used for building the Egypt, and charoset is a member of the mortar. And he said, Amar Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Tzadok, Rabbi Lazar said, Kach hayu omrim tagarei charaf. Those the store owner, the small store owner, that they're selling charoset, Shebirushalayim in Jerusalem used to say, Bo'u tlu lachem tavlin lemitzvah. Come and take spices for yourself for the mitzvah. So they sit at the entrance of the store, and they show the people, like you see in the shuk in Yerushalayim. So that's they call tagarei charach, like the Song of Songs, chapter 2, metzitz bin acharakim. They're standing there and they said, come and take spices for yourself for the mitzvah. And nowadays you see it a lot. They bring samples in all different stores, and that's the way they're selling, they're marching. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Taf Ein Hey 475. Krichat matzah umaror. After one has recited the blessing and eaten an olive bark, kezayit of matzah, and recite the blessing over bitter herbs, and eaten an olive bark of bitter herbs, he takes the third matzah and prepare a sandwich together with the bitter herbs, which is eaten without bracha, without a blessing. One reclines and recites the phrase, Zeicher l'Hamikdash ke'Hillel, members of the Beit HaMikdash, the way that Hillel did it. We learn also, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 473, Kol shetibu lo b'mashke. If one eats foods that are usually dipped in one of 7 liquids that transfer ritual impurity. If you remember, we use it many times, the wine, honey, oil, milk, dough, blood, and water. He must first wash his hands if the food is still wet. This washing is performed even if this person does not touch the food where it is wet. No blessing is recited upon this washing. This halacha is not commonly observed, for people rely on the opinion of the early commentaries that is unnecessary, as Jews are no longer particular with regard to ritual purity and impurity. That's the Magen Avraham Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 158. So on the Seder night, one washed his hands before dipping the karpas, but he does not recite the blessing after his washing. Even one who does not usually wash before eating wet foods should do so on this occasion to arouse the curiosity of the children, as we mentioned also in Shulchan Aruch Harav. Tvilat maror b'charoset, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 475. The bitter herb, the maror, are dipped in the charoset, and the Pri Chadash said to neutralize the poison they contain. In most places the custom is to dip only a part of the herb. In any case, one should leave the bitter herbs in the charoset long enough to awaken its bitterness. Netilat yadayim barishona. We wash hands first. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 475. The hands are washed without a blessing for the vegetable, for the karpas. Later, one washes his hand again and recite the blessing before eating matzah. Now, when a person swallows matzah and bitter herbs, bala matzah umaror, one who swallows matzah without chewing it fulfills the obligation to eat matzah. However, if he swallows a bitter herb without chewing them, he does not fulfill the mitzvah of bitter herb, as one must taste their bitterness. If he swallows matzah and bitter herbs together, he fulfills his obligation to eat matzah, but not the obligation to eat bitter herbs. If he wraps matzah and bitter herbs in something else and swallow them, he does not fulfill even the obligation to eat matzah, as this is not a normal manner. Now we also talk a little bit in the arrangement of the Seder plate, which again, it's a separate session. But just to give you the vignette, the key point, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 473, the Seder plate is brought before the leader of the Seder. There is no need to place a similar plate before all those attending the Seder. You see it in some families, but there's no need to do it. You have the main one, and the leader can use it. We also learn about Okrim et HaShulchan. After the recitation of the passage beginning, the poor bread, Halach Ma'anya, which opened the Magid section of the Agadah, the matzot is removed from the table or placed in its edge, as though meal has been completed. That's the Rashbam. Today, the Magen Avraham said the practice is not to remove the matzot, as the children already know that they are not there to be eaten at this time. Nevertheless, it is custom to cover the matzot. If you pay attention, at that time we cover them. We also talk a little bit about manishtana, the questions children ask after pouring the second cup of wine. So they said the 4 questions are recited. Even if one conducts the Seder alone, he must ask and answer the questions. If one's wife or son asks the questions, there is no need to recite them again, and one begins the passage, Avadim Ayinu. But again, the Ramah said the way that we understand, we usually repeat it again. We learn also the idea of giving the poor prusa, afkan beprusa. So that's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 473. The accepted custom is to use the matzot for the Seder. The middle matzah is broken into two during the Seder, with the larger piece set aside for apikuman, for afikoman. When the time to eat the matzah arrives, one takes a piece from the top, whole matzah, together with a piece from the middle, broken matzah, which symbolized affliction, for the blessing over bread. This practice is in accordance with the opinion of Rashi and Rashbam. We say that masik veishto ofa, that it can be inferred from here that it's preferable for each household to bake matzah for the mitzvah. I know many colleagues and friends and Rabbanim that purposely on Erev Pesach bake matzat mitzvah by themselves, and that's based on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 460. Also the charoset. He said it's a mitzvah to eat charoset in commemoration of the apple and the mortar. The custom is to prepare it thick like clay and to add spicy herbs. The Sephardic customs is to prepare charoset from the fruits used to describe the Jewish people in the prophets and the Song of Songs, which means figs, apples, and dates. Another custom is to add species such as cinnamon and ginger in memory of the hay, or vinegar or red wine in memory of the blood. Again, there are many minhagim. You see the Ramah, you see Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 473, and you see always that people have a different minhagim. The last halacha of today is the obligation to ask questions. One must ask the 4 questions at the table. If a child is present who knows how to ask, then he should do so. If not, the wife asks the 4 questions. If one alone, as we said earlier, he asks himself. Even a highest Torah scholar must ask each other the 4 questions.